let's start with drums. I'm going to mute the bass. Now, again, I'm going to start. There's more than one way to do all this. There's a lot of different ways, actually. But I always start with my groups first, and then I start doing any individual EQ, compression, or whatever is needed. So I have my master bus kind of set a little bit. Now I'm going to go to my drum bus. I'm going to mute the bass for now, because if you remember in last week in prep, the mix prep, I am running the bass out my drum bus. So let's just hear what happens as I go through my settings here. So I'm adding a little bit. I'm not doing a ton. This compressor, I'm 2-to-1. I don't have the threshold down very far. Fast attack, 3 milliseconds, and the release as fast as I can go. And this is the Logic, just studio effect compressor, which is most likely, by the look of it, they're trying to copy an 1176. Is it? No. But you can kind of get it to do a similar kind of thing as the 1176, and it's nice and fast. Now, you'll see I have another compressor here. This is where things start to vary a little bit for me in the box as opposed to out here on the console. And it will depend largely on how well things were recorded or how consistent the playing is of any given instrument. In this case, we're on the drum bus. As you can see here, I have a slower attack, 16 milliseconds. I'm going to let a lot more transient through there, and I have a much slower release. But I'm only 1-to-4, and I don't have a super low threshold. Now, what I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to let the attack that we had from the drums go through. And with the slower release, I just want to keep the compressor kind of working. I'm not trying to clamp. I'm not doing this necessarily for effect. It's more of, it's an overall containment compressor. So let me just pull the threshold down. We'll see what's happening. So as you see, if I pull the threshold down too much, we start to lose the snare. We lose the punch. We lose some of the excitement. So this is just minimal. I don't always do this, but usually I have a compressor on for that so I can just check as I'm going. Maybe I need to help contain some snare fills or tom fills, that sort of thing. And you'll notice I'm using the Logic Platinum compressor for this because it doesn't have its own sound at all. It's just clean with no extra tonal changes. I'm getting a little bit of that from this guy, and the drums already sound good, so I'm not looking to do more. For now, I'm going to leave it off. So the individuals, the kick drum. Now I'm emphasizing attack here. I want that punch to come through. So 20 millisecond attack. I'm letting as much of the transient go through as possible, and I have the release on this as fast as I can get it. And I just want it to cut off. Let a lot go through, cut off really fast. I'm trying to get adding some punch there. And I'm using the Logic compressor, the Platinum one again, because I like the kick sound. I'm not trying to change it. Here I have a second one going. Actually, let's do this first. Let's see if there's any difference in the sound. We're going to go, where's the studio FET? Okay. Without changing any settings, I'm just going to click through these. I actually kind of like this one better. Although we're in solo, so these differences are so minimal. And again, a lot of this stuff, I'm going to do first with the track going, and I'm going to solo up if I have a problem or if I'm just double checking what's going on. But for this, I wanted to solo things up so we can hear kind of how everything's happening, right? So there's that second compressor again, fast attack, slow release, 2-to-1. That's my containment compressor if I need it. Because I just find that if I'm running stuff out here to the console and the outboard gear, everything tends to just kind of sit better faster. Whereas in the box, I may need an extra round of something to get that similar thing to happen. Now, what the heck am I doing here? Ooh, what do we got going? Adding bottom, as you can see, adding a little snap, scooping some mids, trying to, you know, leave some room for guitars, bass, and that sort of thing. And in this case, I'm actually adding a shelf at 6K. Cleans it up a little bit, gonna help when you hear everything. Snare, we have a similar thing going here compression-wise. First one. I already had a lot going on this when we tracked it, so really this is just kind of a little kind of containment. I don't want to, you can see I'm at 19.5 milliseconds in a fast release, so I'm not really trying to squash this more. It's just adding a little bit. We may not even need it. I'm going to leave it off for now. We'll turn it on in context and see if it makes any difference whatsoever. Let's find a tom fill that we can hear. Let's see. We'll just go to this guy right here. So pull up the toms. It's kind of short. Let's go to a little bit longer guy. Here we go. That's no big tom fills here. So first off, compression. This I'm going fast attack, kind of a slower release. Because I wanted that compressor to stay on to kind of help pull out a little bit of tone in the compressor, or in the tom sound, because I'm also adding a lot of bottom. I'm going to try to get away with murder on this track with boosting bottom and some attack across the kicks and the toms. But then, we're going to get to one of my favorite plugins in this multipressor, and I love this. If at the very least, this allows you to go check your different area frequency ranges, so I can listen just the bottom. Oh, let's turn it on first, so I can hear what's happening down there. You can hear the low mids, kind of high, and in this case, you'll see that I have pulled my threshold down on the bottom. Because of all the low end I'm boosting, I don't want it to get out of hand too much on the tom fills. And these are pretty simple tom fills, but I didn't want to EQ it out because I EQ'd a bunch of that in. So with the multipressor, I just can contain it a little bit without physically changing what's going on. Overheads, I do have some EQ going. Let's get our other loop back here. Back to our A section. Now, I'm not a big, as some of you might know, I am not a big overheads or cymbal mic guy. I like to get tone from the overheads. I like to get my drum sound a lot from there. So you'll notice that although graphically it looks like this giant, low cut going on, it's only from 100 hertz down, and it's to get rid of the boom. You can kind of hear. And then I'm shaving a little bit of my low mids, and I'm adding a little bit of extra top end to it, because that's just how it worked out. But I don't like to take too much tone out of my overheads. That's just where a lot of the goodness is. I want to keep it there. So let's hear, and last, our rooms. Let's hear what's going on here. So they're already compressed a little bit, but guess what? I'm going to do a little bit more. And I'm back on the Logic FET Studio FET. I am 30-1. I am radical here. As fast as my attack will go, as fast as my release will go, I'm in soft. The distortion I have over here in soft clip. And you can see my threshold's about -27. And I'm trying to kind of emulate that soft clip distortion I get from my 1176s with all the buttons in. You can hear the bottom end breaking up a little bit, which is cool. And you can see the compressor's acting really fast. So it's getting in, getting out, getting in, getting out. So let's hear all of this in context. Edit in there. You can get away with murder once everything comes in, though. Not too worried about it. Okay, so that right there is our basic drum sound. The next thing I'm going to do with the drums is, we talked about this briefly last week, is we have some parallel compression going right here. I do have a compressor on. As you can tell, I like this version of the Logic compressor a lot. My attack is at 18.5 here, with my release being considerably faster. I am 4-1, and I'm making up some volume with the makeup gain. And I'm going to send kick, snare, and toms. So let's see how that... Now remember my rooms, guys, because I'm already compressed them and I'm compressing more. I am not sending them out the drum bus where they're going to have yet a little bit more. I'm sending them straight to my 2 bus. So they just go out, okay? So I'm going to bring in this parallel compression as we're playing. It really helps punch the kick and the snare forward. And it makes it a little easier to kind of hear the articulation of those instruments. And that's basic. There's one other thing with the drums, but I'm going to do that once we get everything going inside it. And there's 2 other things, actually. You can see these 2 are still off. We'll get there in a minute. Let's go to the other part of our rhythm section, which is our bass. There's our clean tone. The first thing I did before I actually went to any of the compression or anything on the bass, I knew I was going to need some grit that we didn't have from tracking. So the first thing I wanted to do was just kind of dial in my tone. And since I'm staying with all the stock stuff, I went to the Logic pedal board, pulled out the vintage drive. We're going to turn that on. And add some little bit of gnarliness to that, right? But you can hear that the low end shifts when I turn this on. So listen to that. Big and fat. And we lose some of that bottom when that goes on. So we need to pull up our gain. We need to check our phase. We get that sub back in there now. So now we've got a nice full bass tone going on. So now we can go to our bass bus. Let's start with the compressor. Most of the time, I would say I end up compression and then EQ. But I'll flip them back more. On the console, it's easy because just one button goes back and forth. But I'd say most of the time I end up this way. So I'm going to start with my compression. So we got about 5 dB of reduction going here, but it helps clean it up just a little bit in the low mids, and it makes it a touch more aggressive, which I was going for on this particular track. Now, I do have a second compressor if needed. You can see fast tack, slow release, containment. This one, only a 2-to-1, staying on all the time. It's kind of like, I look at this as a bit of a soft limiter. Instead of having some sort of hard limit that just squashes and keeps it down there, I'll use a lower ratio, longer release time, and I'll just have the compressor constantly working and just containing a little bit. I'm going to leave it on from now. We'll see if we actually need it in a minute. Now EQ, I'm getting a little radical here. Adding a bunch more low end, and I'm adding everywhere across the board here. Let's hear what that sounds like with drums so we have a little bit of context. It actually helps cut considerably with all that. Now this band right here, we could do this. Check what happens. I'm going to turn it off or take it back to 0, and then I'm going to scoop that sucker. When that particular frequency range is scooped, then around 800 there, it starts to sound a little more modern metal or modern hard rock bass sound. I'd probably need to actually bring this EQ boost up higher or the overall track. I like it with that 800. I love that 800, 900 area on bass. If you get it right, it can be really gnarly, and it could really help a bass guitar cut through a dense mix. I'm going to leave it for now. We'll see what happens later. There's our rhythm section.